Okay.
Oh, cool.
We got oysters. Look at all these oysters.
I used to travel around the country doing software sales, and now I'm an oyster farmer.
And while that sounds crazy, Peter's actually not alone. Oysters represent a huge growth industry in New York right now. New York City used to be famous for its oysters. It harvested them by the millions and it sent them all over the world. But these days, that's all gone. And within the last 10 years, New York's been trying to bring that back. The state has quietly been pouring millions of dollars into revitalizing the oyster industry. And dozens of farms, like this one that Peter owns, are popping up all over Long Island.
I think that it represents a really, really cool investment opportunity and growth opportunity.
So join me as we learn a little bit more about this unsung hero and the farms, government programs, and nonprofits that are all investing in its future right now. And who knows, maybe I'll even try a few myself along the way. Would that be so wrong? Back in the 1800s, this city was an oyster hub. New Yorkers ate around $6 million worth of oysters a year. That's $250 million by today's money. 200,000 acres of oysters went across New York Harbor. And what they didn't eat, they shipped all over the world. But by the 1900s, due to factors like overfishing, commercial waterfront development, and pollution, that number had drastically reduced. And now about 80% of New York's oyster harvest comes from aquaculture, which is basically what it sounds like. That's farming that takes place on the water. And most of that comes from Long Island, where I'm headed right now.
We're already starting to count the plus or minus 15,000 oysters that we've harvested today. This time of year, we're moving through tens of thousands of oysters a week.
Peter founded Pico Oysters back in 2016.
I'm driven by the idea of being able to do both well and good at the same time. It is a product that is widely sought after, and on an environmental side of things, what we do in growing oysters has a net benefit for the ecosystem, for the environment in which we grow them. It's tough to kind of model all of that into a spreadsheet, but taking all of that into consideration, it was an attractive business to me.
But growing oysters through aquaculture farms is hard. They have to basically mimic how oysters would grow naturally in the wild.
So we are at our hatchery. This is called Shellfisher Preserve. This is where oysters start. We spawn and grow juvenile oysters and larval size oysters by the tens of millions.
Here, baby oysters are spawned, and then they're moved into this room to latch, all within 4 weeks. At this stage here, you can see they're starting to look like actual oysters to the naked eye, even though each one is about the size of a poppy seed. For the oysters to get bigger, they need to eat different kinds of algae, which is made in this crazy looking machine. It's a photobioreactor, a new and more efficient way of cultivating the algae. And this mad scientist looking greenhouse is actually a system to grow all these different colored algae species. And it's not a coincidence that this greenhouse is directly above the hatchery.
One of the cool aspects of the physical setup of what we do here is that we're very much just using gravity to bring the algae downstairs to the hatchery.
These are just some of the innovations that Peter's using to advance his oyster business. Once big enough, they'll be moved to the bay, where they'll continue to grow for up to 2 years.
This basket holds probably something in the neighborhood of about 150 market-size oysters.
Got it.
This is kind of like what happens out in the water. We come back along and let's say we want to harvest all of the oysters and get them out of the baskets.
Yeah.
We have yet another piece of equipment that will flip these baskets over, the door opens,
Oh, cool.
and all the oysters fall out. Now you're gonna be a bayman by the end of the day, man.
Yeah. And if that seems like a lot of work to grow just one oyster, it is. It's a ton of work.
Mother Nature's a relentless and ruthless teacher. My first year or two, I lost far more oysters and killed far more oysters than survived and made it to market. Things didn't really get moving until 2017, 2018.
Now, Pico's success rate for its oysters reaching the market is about 85%, which is pretty great. So people are really innovating in oysters. You're not doing it the way it's been done for hundreds of years.
Absolutely, but we have to figure out ways to be more efficient because otherwise I can't afford, as a business, I can't afford to keep that many people on staff. We have to figure out ways to to produce 5 oysters per person today and 100 oysters per person next year.
To increase scale and provide employees livable wages, Peter and other aquaculture farmers need to implement more innovation in the machinery and specifically engineered equipment they use. And one way that Pico's made these operations a little less challenging is by being completely vertical. They own it all, from the hatchery where they breed the oysters to the trucks that bring fresh oysters into New York City.
I think that the vertical integration and having some control over our own supply chain provides us with some very attractive growth opportunities and growth prospects over the next 3 to 5, 10 years.
But even with that added control, Pico faces tons of question marks every season. And while larger companies might be able to absorb added costs or issues more easily, small farms like Pico are more vulnerable.
We could have bad seasons still going forward with potentially harmful algal blooms or something along those lines in the bays, but right now we are set up so that way we are utilizing different areas of the water, so that way we have some degree of kind of modularity or redundancy.
But the good news is one bad season won't be devastating in the long run, because overall the seafood market is growing, with the shellfish market alone expected to grow by nearly $20 billion in the next decade. This is a huge opportunity for growth in New York's coastal communities. Just within the past decade, 50 new oyster farms have popped up all over Long Island. And to add fuel to the fire, Governor Hochul has announced a $10 million investment in a new shellfish hatchery right here on Long Island. The new facility will produce hundreds of millions of new baby oysters. And part of this initiative is to meet the growing needs of an industry that currently imports 39% of its oyster spat from out of state. And just this year, another $5 million is going to help farmers invest in things like marine dock space, processing equipment, and other much needed infrastructure.
The state providing us with some grant funding, whether that's a matching grant or just a straight grant funding for various different projects to help improve our businesses through infrastructure or equipment, has been enormously helpful.
And this is all part of New York's new blue food transformation, which isn't just about boosting marine farming businesses.
I know that there are investment firms out there today that are looking at putting kind of, quote, nature on the balance sheet. There are environmental impacts to using fresh water, to having to buy animal feed and how that animal feed is produced, to pesticides, etc. We don't have any need for that in the oyster farming industry. And the byproduct of what we do and the equipment that we use and the equipment that we deploy into the water actually provides sanctuary for juvenile finfish species.
By now you're probably thinking, oysters seem like such a great business to invest in. I want to start my own farm. But before you can get your business going, you'll need a domain name for your website. And there's no better place to buy one than Pork Bun, who also happens to be the sponsor of this video. Pork Bun offers at-cost pricing on hundreds of domains, with over 500 extensions from .com and .net to .pro, .dev, and more. With every Pork Bun domain, you'll get access to free domain features like SSL certificates, WHOIS privacy, DNS, URL forwarding, and hosting trials, which are all helpful for making sure your website functions properly. Also, their user interface is simple, and you won't see any upsells unless you choose to. The best part is that Pork Bun offers personalized customer support 365 days a year from real humans, not some AI chatbot. Pork Bun has more 5-star reviews from real customers on Trustpilot than any other platform. So it's no wonder Pork Bun was named the #1 domain registrar by USA Today the last 3 years in a row. Go to porkbun.com/morningbrew25 and use code BREWBUN to get $1 off your next domain name. Now, let's get back to shucking some oysters, something I'm definitely really good at and picked up really quickly with no problems at all. I'm from Boston, but I've never shucked an oyster before.
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the tip of the knife and you're gonna kind of wiggle it into the hinge right here.
Yeah.
Once you leverage the knife up and you're in that spot, you're just gonna be able to pry the two shells apart.
Right, well, let's see if I can do it that easily.
There you go. Yeah,
then...
yeah. There's a muscle right there. So you got to sneak the knife along the top shell to get to that muscle. Yeah, if it's loose, there you go. The last thing that you have to do is get that muscle off the bottom shell.
Okay.
You're just going to scrape that muscle off the bottom shell.
Great.
There you go.
That's delicious.
Doesn't get much better.
It doesn't get better.
Yeah.
These oysters came out of the water this morning.
Indeed.
And we just throw it over?
Yeah.
Look at this. Ready?
It's pretty cool.
I gotta have another one. And even after an oyster is shucked, its shell can still be repurposed and used. You'll find a pretty big chunk of them back in Manhattan, where they'll be used for an entirely different, but still pretty great purpose. I'm here at Billion Oyster Project's headquarters on Governor's Island, and their goal is, you guessed it, to put 1 billion oysters back into New York Harbor by 2035. And one piece of Billion Oyster Project's mission is taking shells out of landfills and into the harbor where they can help to grow new oysters. This is all 2.9 million pounds of oysters. And to just get a sense of the scale, and because I think it would be fun, I have to climb on top.
In order to do our oyster restoration, we need a large-scale supply of oyster shells in order for our oyster larvae to attach onto. Anecdotally, when speaking with some of our restaurant partners, Pico Oysters comes up as one of their favorite suppliers of oysters in New York City.
So what are we here to do now? Why am I wearing gloves?
So right now we're going to pull up one of our oyster research stations, which we have all along this dock on these blue lines. We have oyster research stations all across docks and piers in New York City.
This is done regularly to monitor oyster numbers, check water quality, and encourage students and volunteers to actually get involved in the ecological research that Billion Oyster Project is doing. Should I get pulling?
See what we find.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, we got oysters. Look at all these oysters.
This is a good one.
Can we eat these oysters?
So the oysters in our oyster research stations, and also any of the oysters that we're repopulating into New York Harbor, are not for consumption. We don't have the cleanest water at the moment in New York City, so we want to make sure we're not eating these oysters.
New York City's wastewater is designed to flow straight into New York Harbor with almost no treatment. So that means that the wastewater is essentially flowing through these oysters. And while they can survive while cleaning up the pollution, we wouldn't do so well if we ate them. That's why these devices look so different from the flip farms we saw at Pico. Billion Oyster Project allows their oysters to grow into 3D reef structures so they can have the maximum impact on the environment.
In that way, oysters actually have very similar benefits to coral reefs, where they can attenuate wave energy and reduce shoreline erosion. So they're actually really great for storm protection and coastal erosion and mitigation. And oysters also, because they grow in these 3D reef structures, they create a lot of nooks and crannies for other marine wildlife to hide in and to feed on. So oysters are actually known as a keystone species. When an oyster is thriving in an environment, it indicates that a lot of other marine life is also thriving.
All this to say, oysters can help us in a ton of ways. In just the past few years, we've been seeing a decline in striped bass spawns, which is just one example of the decline in biodiversity that could harm tri-state and New York fishermen down the line. And it's just one of the many reasons that warrants all of the time, attention, and investment from small oyster farmers, New York State, and nonprofits. And other oyster restoration projects are underway in the Pacific Northwest, Chesapeake Bay, and other regions of the US where oyster health has long been vital to local ecosystems and economies. And overseas, Bangladesh, Australia, United Kingdom, and other countries are all investing millions into their own oyster restoration projects. Billion Oyster Project has 17 different restoration sites, covering 19 acres across New York City. In order to help us, or help the ocean, the reefs need to be healthy. This means the spat, or baby oysters, need to grow to a certain size and stay alive.
We weren't actually sure that this whole project would work. And we're now at the point where we're seeing that it can work, and we're also seeing all of the other benefits that aren't just coming from the oysters being in the water, but from having more oyster reefs, what that's doing to the estuary as a whole. To date, we have restored about 150 million oysters to New York Harbor.
And Billion Oyster Project isn't alone at restoring oysters in New York City. In 2021, a $1.5 million project designed by the Hudson River Park Trust, New York State, and a local engineering firm deployed oysters into the water via man-made cages that they put off of the piers by Tribeca. All around the world, healthy oyster reefs help the environment and local seafood jobs, making it one of the most impactful possible conservation projects. Who knew oysters could be so valuable? This little guy's got a bright future. He's just lucky I can't eat him. Now I get to throw the oyster research station back into the water.